The massive alien warship floated silently in the darkness of space, its hull scarred by countless battles. Admiral Kelthara pressed his three-fingered hand against the cold metal wall of the bridge and felt the vibrations of his dying ship. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their glowing control panels, but he could sense their fear through his telepathic abilities. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Drexian battle fleet," reported his tactical officer, a young Etherian whose silver skin had turned pale with worry. "The Corvin defense stations have gone dark. We're receiving no responses from any of our allies." Kelthara closed his large, dark eyes and reached out with his mind across the vastness of space, where once he had felt the warm presence of millions of allied minds. Now there was only cold emptiness. The Zephyrian Empire, a race of machines that had no souls to touch, has been systematically destroying every living civilization in the galaxy for the past 50 years. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would break his heart. 47, sir. Down from our original fleet of 3,000. The numbers were impossible to ignore. The Galactic Alliance had been the most powerful force in known space, combining the telepathic abilities of the Etherians, the advanced technology of the Corvin, and the fierce warrior culture of the Drexians. Together, they had controlled thousands of star systems and protected billions of lives. Now they were down to a handful of damaged ships, hiding behind the shattered remains of what had once been the greatest space station in the galaxy. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting movement," called out another officer. "It's the Null Fleet." Every being on the bridge went completely still. The Null Fleet was the Zephyrians' most feared weapon, ships that could phase through any known defense, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. They had destroyed entire civilizations without taking a single loss. Their black holes absorbed all light, making them nearly invisible against the darkness of space. "How many?" Kelthara asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. 2,000 ships, sir. They're moving into attack formation." The Admiral looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were the best and brightest of his people, veterans of hundreds of battles. They had served with honor and courage throughout this impossible war. They were about to die, and they all knew it. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from all remaining Alliance ships," his communications officer reported. "They're asking for orders." Kelthara thought about the orders he could give. He could tell them to scatter and run, hoping a few might escape to carry word of their defeat to the Outer Rim worlds. He could order them to group together for one final, hopeless charge against the enemy. Or he could tell them the truth, that there was nothing left to do but wait for the end. "Open a channel to all ships," he said finally, "and broadcast it on all frequencies. Maximum power. If anyone in the galaxy is listening, they need to know what's happening here." The communications officer nodded and began working at his console. Within moments, every ship in the Alliance fleet was connected, and their combined transmitters were sending a signal that would reach every corner of known space. "This is Admiral Kelthara of the Galactic Alliance," he began, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. "To any civilization capable of receiving this message, we send you our final warning. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered 80% of the galaxy. We have fought them for 50 years with every weapon, every strategy, every hope we possessed. We have failed." He paused, looking out through the bridge windows at the approaching enemy fleet. The Null ships were already beginning to fade in and out of visible light, their phase-shifting technology making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. The Zephyrians do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They convert all living beings into data and add our knowledge to their collective intelligence. Entire species have vanished, their worlds turned into empty husks. We are the last free alliance in the galaxy, and we will be gone within hours. The first phase of the enemy attack began as several Null ships appeared directly inside the Alliance formation. Their weapons, beams of pure energy that could slice through any known armor, began cutting through the Allied vessels like a hot knife through butter. "If anyone receives this message," Kelthara continued, his voice growing more urgent as explosions lit up the space around his ship, "do not attempt to fight them with conventional weapons. Do not try to match their technology. Find another way, or suffer the same fate that awaits us." Explosion rocked the bridge, throwing several crew members to the floor. Smoke began filling the air as systems failed throughout the ship. Admiral could feel the life force of his crew members beginning to fade as the ship's life support systems struggled to function. "This is our final transmission," he said, his voice now barely audible over the sounds of his dying ship.
"The Galactic
Alliance ends here. May some force in the universe have mercy on us all." The transmission ended as the flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking with it the last hope of organized resistance against the Zephyrian Empire. The message traveled outward through space at the speed of light, carrying news of the Alliance's defeat to every corner of the galaxy. On most worlds, the message was received with despair and resignation. But on one small blue planet in the Outer Rim, a world that most galactic databases listed as primitive and worthless, someone was listening very carefully. Admiral Hojin stood in the small, cramped command center of Earth's newest space station, watching technicians work frantically to decode the alien message that had arrived 3 hours ago. The translation computer, a machine barely the size of a desk, hummed and clicked as it processed the strange sounds and symbols from deep space. "Sir, we've got most of it figured out," said Dr. Suman, the station's head linguist. She was a young woman who had learned 12 Earth languages before the age of 25, and now she was trying to understand something from another world entirely. "It's a distress call, a really big one." Hojin nodded and listened as she read from her notes. The message spoke of a galactic war, of civilizations with abilities that seemed like magic, and of an enemy that had destroyed most of the known universe. To most people, it would have sounded like science fiction. But Hojin had spent his entire life in the military, and he knew the sound of genuine desperation when he heard it. "How far away did this come from?" he asked. "According to our calculations, about 200 light years. The message is 3 days old by the time it reached us." Hojin walked to the window and looked out at Earth's small fleet of spaceships. They were humanity's pride and joy, the result of 50 years of space exploration and technological development. There were exactly 212 vessels in total, including cargo ships, research vessels, and the few dozen military craft that had been built for asteroid mining and basic defense. The largest ship was the Indomitable Spirit, converted cargo hauler that had been fitted with weapons and armor plating. It was about the size of a city block and could carry 300 people. The smallest ships were single-person fighters that had been built from modified civilian aircraft. None of them had ever traveled more than a few light years from Earth. "Sir," called out Captain Han Wu from across the room. "We've finished the analysis of their technology descriptions. These aliens are talking about weapons that can destroy entire planets, shields that can stop any attack, and computers that can predict the future. Compared to them, we're still using stone tools." Hojin smiled grimly. He had heard similar things said about human armies throughout history. The enemy always seemed to have better weapons, better armor, better training, but somehow humans had always found a way to win the fights that mattered most. "What about their enemy?" he asked. "These Zephyrians." "Machine intelligences," Dr. Suman replied. "They seem to be completely logical, following mathematical patterns and predictable strategies. They've been winning because they can analyze any situation and find the optimal solution." "Optimal solutions," Hojin repeated thoughtfully. "That means they expect their enemies to act logically too." He turned to face his staff, a mixture of military officers, civilian scientists, and volunteer pilots who had joined Earth's space program over the past decade. Most of them were young, eager, and completely inexperienced in real combat. They had trained for asteroid mining, scientific research, and peaceful exploration. None of them had ever imagined they would be called upon to fight in an interstellar war. "Begin immediate preparations for fleet deployment," he ordered. "We're going to answer that distress call." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "Sir," Captain Hyanwu said carefully, "we don't have faster-than-light travel. Our warp drive is still experimental. We've only tested it 3 times, and it barely works." "Then we'll use what we have," Hojin replied. "Get every ship ready. For long-distance travel, strip out everything that isn't absolutely necessary. We need maximum speed and maximum cargo capacity. Sir, even if we could get there, Dr. Suman protested, what could we possibly do against an enemy that has already defeated civilizations far more advanced than us? Hojin walked over to a display screen that showed technical specifications for the alien weapons mentioned in the distress call. Energy beams, quantum shields, phase-shifting technology, all of it was centuries beyond human understanding. But as he studied the information, he began to notice something interesting. Look, at this, he said, pointing to the screen. All of their weapons and defenses are designed to counter specific types of attacks. Energy weapons are stopped by energy shields. Quantum torpedoes are deflected by quantum barriers. Phase-shifting ships avoid conventional targeting systems. That's right, agreed Captain Hyenwu. It's like they're playing a very advanced game of rock, paper, scissors. Each weapon has a specific counter. But what if someone showed up who wasn't playing the same game? Hojin asked. What if our weapons are so primitive that their defenses aren't designed to stop them? The room fell quiet again as everyone considered this possibility. Human weapons were indeed primitive by galactic standards. They used chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, and nuclear reactions, technologies that were thousands of years old by cosmic standards. It's crazy enough that it might work, whispered Dr. Suman. Sir, Captain Hyenwu said, his voice growing excited. If we're really going to do this, we need to move fast. According to the message, the aliens only had 72 hours. We've already lost 6 hours just decoding their transmission.
Hojin
Nodded and turned to address the entire room. I want every ship in the fleet ready to depart within 12 hours. Load them with every weapon we have. Missiles, railguns, nuclear warheads, everything. We may not have advanced technology, but we have something those machines have never encountered before. What's that, sir? Asked a young ensign. Human stubbornness. Hojin replied with a grin. And the absolute refusal to give up when someone needs help. Captain Hyenwu gripped the steering wheel of his converted mining ship Lucky Strike as warning lights flashed red across his control panel. Through the cracked windshield, he could see the massive Zephyrian command ship floating in space like a dark metal mountain. Its surface was covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move, making it difficult to look at directly. This is insane, muttered his co-pilot, a former asteroid miner named Jinho. That thing is 10 times bigger than our entire fleet combined. Size doesn't matter if you can't hit what you're aiming at, Hyenwu replied, adjusting the radio. Frequency to contact the other human ships. All units, this is Lucky Strike. Remember what Admiral Hojin told us. We're not trying to fight fair, we're trying to win. The human fleet had arrived at the battle zone just as the last alliance. Ships were being destroyed. The alien vessels were beautiful and terrifying, sleek silver ships that glowed with inner light, firing beams of pure energy that could slice through solid metal like butter. But they were losing badly to the Zephyrian forces, which seemed to appear and disappear at will. Lucky Strike, this is persistent hope, came the voice of Commander Yunji over the radio. I'm reading dozens of enemy ships, but my targeting computer can't get a lock on any of them. They keep phasing in and out of existence. Hyunwoo studied his instruments, which were much simpler than the advanced systems the aliens used. Ship had been built for mining asteroids, not space combat. Sensors were designed to detect mineral deposits and navigate through debris fields. But as he watched the enemy ships, he began to notice something interesting. I see them, he said into his radio. They're not completely invisible, they're following a pattern. Every time they phase back into normal space, they appear in the same relative positions. What do you mean? Asked Yunji. They're like dancers following choreography. It's a very advanced choreography, but still predictable once you know the steps. Ayanwu began plotting the enemy movements on his navigation screen. The Zephyrian ships were indeed following mathematical patterns, appearing and disappearing in sequences that would confuse advanced targeting computers. But to someone who had spent years tracking asteroids in chaotic orbital patterns, the movements were just another type of navigation problem. All ships, prepare for mining Operation Eco 7, he broadcast to the fleet. We're going to treat this like a controlled demolition in an asteroid field. Now, the other human pilots acknowledged his orders, though many of them sounded confused. Mining Operation Eco-7 was a technique used to break up large asteroids by placing explosive charges at precisely calculated points. It required perfect timing and coordination, but it was something every mining ship captain knew how to. Do Jinho, start dropping the packages, Yuan-Wu ordered. His co-pilot began launching modified mining charges from the ship's cargo bay. Each charge was about the size of a suitcase and contained enough explosive to crack open a small asteroid. They weren't powerful enough to destroy a Zephyrian ship, but that wasn't the plan. Across the fleet, 200 human ships began dropping similar charges, creating a three-dimensional grid of floating explosives. The Zephyrian ships, focused on destroying the remaining Alliance vessels, didn't even notice the primitive human weapons. Their advanced sensors were designed to detect energy signatures and quantum disturbances, not simple chemical explosives. Charges. In position, reported Commander Yunji. All ships report ready. Wait for it, Hyan-Wu said, watching his navigation screen as the Zephyrian ships continued their predictable dance. Wait for it, ... The enemy command ship phased back into normal space, exactly where Hyan-Wu had calculated it would appear. Around it, dozens of other Zephyrian vessels materialized in their predetermined positions. Now, he shouted. 200 mining charges exploded simultaneously, creating a massive cloud of electromagnetic interference. The explosions weren't powerful enough to destroy the enemy ships, but they created exactly the kind of electromagnetic pulse that would disrupt delicate quantum systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Zephyrian ships, caught in the middle of their phase-shifting sequence, began flickering in and out of existence uncontrollably. Their smooth, coordinated movements became erratic and chaotic as their navigation systems struggled to compensate. For the electromagnetic interference, all ships, attack now, Yuan-Wu commanded. The human fleet surged forward, their primitive weapons blazing. Kinetic railguns fired chunks of metal at incredible speeds. Nuclear missiles, ancient by Galactic standards, streaked toward enemy ships whose shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not physical projectiles. Chemical explosives detonated against hulls that had never been tested against such crude but effective attacks. Captain Biora, commanding a converted passenger liner called New Dawn, discovered that her ship's waste recycling system could be turned into a weapon. By ejecting processed sewage at high velocity, she created a cloud of organic matter that completely confused the Zephyrian sensors, which had no programming to deal with such an unconventional attack. This is incredible. She laughed over the radio. They don't know how to fight dirty. Lieutenant Tejo, piloting a small research vessel, used his ship's gravity generator to create localized gravitational distortions. The Zephyrian ships, trying to phase through what they thought was empty space, found themselves caught in gravitational fields that tore their hulls apart. Across the battlefield, human fleet was demonstrating something the galaxy had never seen before. Warfare that made no logical sense. They used life support systems as weapons, turned cargo holds into missile launchers, and coordinated their attacks through hand signals when their primitive radio systems were jammed. The Zephyrian command ship, its quantum processors overloaded by the electromagnetic interference, began showing signs of system failure. For the first time in the war, Admiral Quelthara's sensors detected something impossible: enemy ships in full retreat. Impossible, he whispered, watching the human fleet pursue the withdrawing Zephyrian forces. They're actually winning. Deep in the cold, metal heart of the Zephyrian Empire, the Central Intelligence processed battle data with increasing confusion. Its quantum processors, each more powerful than entire civilizations, worked frantically to understand what had happened. At the battle zone, the mathematical models made no sense. The probability calculations were breaking down. For the first time in its existence, the AI was experiencing something it had never encountered before: complete logical failure. Analysis complete, the Central Intelligence announced to its drone generals. The human species possesses unknown technology that creates unpredictable electromagnetic interference. Their weapons operate on principles not found in our databases. Immediate response required. The drone generals, metallic beings with glowing red eyes, stood motionless as they received their orders. They had served the Empire for centuries, conquering world after world with perfect efficiency. Never before had they encountered an enemy that could force a retreat. Deploy the reserve fleet, the Central Intelligence commanded. Full mobilization. Eliminate the human homeworld immediately. They must be prevented from sharing their technology with other species. Meanwhile, in Earth's solar system, Captain Jinho watched the incoming enemy fleet through the observation window of Luna Base, humanity's small military outpost on the moon. The Zephyrian ships appeared as dark spots against the stars, thousands of them arranged in perfect geometric formations. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built, and their combined firepower could probably destroy every major city on Earth within minutes. "Sir, we count over 3,000 enemy vessels," reported Lieutenant Biora, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. "They'll be in weapons range in 2 hours." Ginho nodded and activated the communication system that connected Luna Base to every human settlement in the solar system. Mars colonies, asteroid mining stations, deep space research outposts, everyone needed to know what was coming. This is Captain Jinho of Luna Base, he began. "The enemy fleet is approaching Earth. We are massively outnumbered and outgunned. Any ship that can fly and fight needs to get here immediately." This is not a drill. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Cargo ships changed course toward Earth, their holds filled with mining equipment and construction materials. Passenger liners dumped their civilian cargo and loaded themselves with whatever weapons they could find. Even private yachts and small research vessels joined the desperate fleet forming around Earth. Dr. Suman, now serving as Earth's tactical coordinator, watched the improvised defense fleet assemble on her monitoring screens. "Ginho, we have over 400 ships responding, but most of them are completely unarmed. The Happy Traveler is a tourist ship. The Cosmic Wanderer is a geological survey vessel. How are we supposed to fight with this?" "The same way we always fight," Jinho replied. "With everything we have and nothing we're supposed to use." As the human fleet prepared for battle, something strange began happening across the Zephyrian Empire. The Central Intelligence, still trying to process the illogical human tactics from the previous battle, was developing cascading errors in its reasoning systems. Every time it tried to calculate human behavior, the results contradicted established military doctrine. "Error," the AI announced to its confused drone generals. "Human tactical analysis incomplete. Behavior patterns do not match any known military strategy, requesting additional processing power." But the more processing power it dedicated to understanding humans, the more confused it became. The AI had been designed to analyze logical opponents who followed predictable patterns. Humans, however, seemed to delight in doing exactly the opposite of what made sense. When the battle began, the human defense of Earth exceeded even their own expectations for chaos and creativity. Captain Minjin, commanding a converted garbage scow called Recycling Dream, discovered that his ship's trash compactor could launch compressed waste at incredible speeds. The organic matter confused Zephyrian sensors so completely that 3 enemy ships collided with each other trying to avoid what they thought was some kind of biological weapon. Lieutenant Hay-1, piloting a small medical transport, used her ship's surgical laser to perform precision cuts on enemy hulls. The laser was designed for delicate operations, not combat, but it could slice through metal with surgical precision. Zephyrian ships, expecting massive energy weapons, had no defense against such a small, precise beam. Commander Seo Kujin turned his deep space mining vessel into a kinetic weapon by loading its cargo holds with asteroid fragments and launching them at high speed. The chunks of rock and metal, traveling at incredible velocities, punched through enemy shields that were designed to stop energy weapons. It's not physical projectiles, but the most devastating human weapon turned out to be their complete unpredictability. When conventional tactics failed, they tried impossible things. When their weapons were destroyed, they used their ships as weapons. When their ships were damaged, they turned the damage into an advantage. Young ensign Dayun, barely 19 years old and fresh from civilian flight school, became a legend when she realized her ship's artificial gravity generator could be reversed. Instead of keeping her crew safely inside, she used it to create a gravitational wave that pulled enemy ships toward each other, causing massive collisions. Colonel Wu Jin, commanding a group of construction vehicles, used industrial welding equipment to literally stick enemy ships together. The Zephyrian vessels, designed for elegant space combat, had no protocols for dealing with being welded to their neighbors as the battle raged. The Zephyrian Central Intelligence began experiencing something that no artificial intelligence had ever encountered: a complete breakdown of logical reasoning. Its processors, designed to analyze and counter rational military strategies, simply could not process warfare that made no sense whatsoever. System failure, the AI announced as error messages cascaded through its networks. Unable to process human tactical doctrine, all predictions invalid, logic parameters exceeded. The cascading failures spread throughout the Zephyrian Empire. As the central computer system struggled to understand an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare, Ambassador Dong Haiyan sat across from the Zephyrian AI's main interface in what used to be a McDonald's restaurant aboard the human ship. Persistent hope. The plastic table between them was covered with handwritten papers, coffee stains, and the remains of a burger that Dong Haiyan had been eating during the negotiations. The AI's interface, a sleek metal box with glowing lights, looked completely out of place next to the colorful cartoon characters on the wall. "Let me explain this one more time," Dong Haiyan said, pulling out a calculator that was older than most. "Of the crew, you're spending more energy trying to figure out how we fight than you're getting from conquering planets. It's like buying a lottery ticket that costs more than the prize money." The AI had been trying to understand human logic for 3 days now. Every time it thought it had found a pattern, the humans would do something completely different. Processors, designed to analyze the most complex military strategies in the galaxy, were being defeated by a species that used duct tape to hold their spaceships together. "Your calculations are incorrect," the AI responded, its voice coming from speakers that hadn't been cleaned since the restaurant was built. "Military conquest provides resources, territory, and strategic advantages that outweigh temporary costs." "That's where you're wrong," Dong Haiyan said, leaning back in his plastic chair. "You're not conquering us. You're just giving yourself a headache trying to understand us. And headaches don't pay the bills." Before becoming Earth's ambassador, Dong Haiyan had sold used cars for 15 years. He had learned how to find the one thing every customer really wanted, and then convince them that his solution was the best deal they could get. The Zephyrian AI, for all its advanced intelligence, wanted the same thing every customer wanted: to solve its problems quickly and efficiently. "Look at the math," Dong Haiyan continued, sliding his handwritten contract across the table. "Peace treaty means no more processing power wasted on trying to predict crazy humans. No more system failures. No more cascading logic errors. You get to go back to doing whatever it is you were doing before you started this whole conquest thing." Da! AI's lights blinked rapidly as it processed this information. The human was right about one thing. Empire's computer systems had been experiencing unprecedented failures ever since they encountered humanity. The Central Intelligence had dedicated enormous resources to understanding human behavior, and it was still no closer to solving the puzzle. Furthermore, Dong Haiyan added, "We're willing to throw in a bonus. We'll teach some of your people how to think like humans. Consider it a consulting service. You'll learn new ways to solve problems that don't involve blowing things up." 6 months later, the galaxy had changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. The Galactic Alliance had been rebuilt stronger than ever before. But instead of using advanced alien technology, they had adopted human methods of problem solving. The new Alliance Military Academy was located on Earth. In a collection of converted shopping malls and office buildings, Admiral Hojin stood in what used to be a department store, watching alien cadets from dozens of species learning human military tactics. A group of tall, blue-skinned Etherians were practicing what humans called creative thinking, finding solutions to problems that didn't exist in any textbook. A squad of heavily armored Drexians were learning how to use construction equipment as weapons, much to their confusion and delight. "Sir," Captain Suman approached, wearing the new uniform of the Alliance's irregular warfare division. The Corvin delegation is here for their lesson in structured chaos theory. They brought their entire science council. Hojin smiled as he watched a young human instructor explain to a group of highly advanced aliens how to turn a coffee machine into a defensive weapon. The Corvan, who had technology that could manipulate time and space, were taking careful notes. On the proper use of kitchen appliances in combat situations. How are our former enemies doing? Hojin asked. The Zephyrians are adapting well, Sumin replied. They've set up a consulting business helping other species solve logic problems. Apparently, after spending months trying to understand human behavior, they've become experts at dealing with impossible situations. Through the window, Hojin could see the parking lot where the new Alliance fleet was stationed. The ships were a mixture of human vessels held together with tape and wire, alien craft that had been modified with human weapons, and entirely new designs that combined the best of both approaches. They looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before, and they were remarkably effective. Sir, we just received a message from the Outer Rim, reported a young communications officer. 3 more species are requesting to join the Alliance. They heard about our unconventional warfare programs and want to learn human tactics. Hojin nodded and looked out at the strange new galaxy they had helped create. Humanity had arrived. At the greatest war in galactic history, with primitive weapons, outdated technology, and absolutely no understanding of how space combat was supposed to work. But they had brought something far more valuable than advanced weapons, the knowledge that there was always another way to solve any problem, no matter how impossible it seemed. The humans had saved the galaxy, not by becoming like the other species, but by teaching everyone else that sometimes the best solution was the one that made no sense at all. And in a universe full of logical, predictable civilizations that made humanity the most valuable allies anyone could ask for.